everybody. They're all more bright-eyed than I am. I'm bright-eyed for now. That's just the drugs. Just kidding. There are no drugs. But I wasn't riding furiously away on the plane, so I'm reading, and I apologize for reading because I hated people read. I do my best to pretend that I'm not reading, and I do my best to make it as little boring as possible. But I would use you all to push some of my thinking through. It's good to have a little bit of a deadline and a sort of damn it please, as it were. And I'm interested in hearing feedback from you if possible. So I hope it doesn't go too wrong. I start with a confession. It's you can take the Irish Catholic girl out of the household, but you can't take the Irish Catholic out of the girl, right? Or the girl in the Irish Catholic, or whatever it is. Here's the confession. I'm a fake, I'm a fraud, and a phony. I'm completely a counterfeit filmmaker. To make that more clear, I didn't go to film school. I didn't spend my lifetime working on documentaries, and I did not memorize the names of cinematographers like baseball heroes when I was a child. And though I'm pretty sure some of you did. And when you guys talk about frame rates, I may be nodding confidently on the outside, but in the inside I'm having a little panic attack, hoping you don't really notice. So I'm an accidental filmmaker, and I've been completely faking it every step of the way. I'm painfully aware that my money and my name vaulted me right past having to spend a lifetime working very hard and for very little things, for very little money on top of it, doing and mastering all the stuff that you guys have done and mastered. So please understand that I take exactly zero of that for granted. I start with my BS-ness because it pains me to imagine that you imagine that I imagine that I have anything edifying for you all to say. So that kind of gets me upset, and it makes me feel a little absurd. So anything I'm about to say, know that you are free to ignore, toss out, anything but heckle. Please don't heckle me. I'm not awake enough for that. I'm just going to try and explain what I've learned on this curious journey I've been on. And I'm focusing mainly on the films that I've had an active hand in making, but everything that I'm going to say also applies to how I think about funding films as well. So take what you like, the rest of it you may freely drag and drop into the trash icon of your mind. I don't know about you, but my brain is kind of, that desktop is pretty cluttered. As I said, I'm an accidental filmmaker. What I am and have always been, by inclination and by choice, is an activist. I organized my first protest when I was 17 in high school, and they threatened to throw me out of high school that day, and that was the best high I'd ever had as a teenager, and look back, but it was activism that brought me to filmmaking, and it was a natural extension of what I was already doing. And when you're focused on changing the world, your desire to wake everyone up is almost painful. That's why we find so many incipient filmmakers among activists and so many activists among filmmakers. The compulsion to communicate is really overwhelming when you're finding out stuff that's just so distressing. So here is rule number one, the first thing I learned about activists making films. We're really, really terrible at it. We completely suck at making films. Every impulse we have as activists and everything we've learned about doing what we do runs counter to making a film that's very engaging or that will have an impact on an audience that'll make any difference. I know this because my partner Ginny Rediker and I fought a lot. Very often she got her way, which is very surprising if anybody knows me. And I'm really, 10 years later, glad that she did. The fights we had were generally about information and about tone. So here's point number one in my manifesto. If persuasion is your goal, information is your enemy. This is not to say that information is unimportant or irrelevant. Getting things right and telling people things and being informative are all valuable things to be doing. But I think we can all agree over these last couple of years of politics in the United States that information on its own won't make the difference. And if some millions of people could believe that there was a child sex trafficking ring in the pizza parlor, and Hillary Clinton was his diabolical master, facts on their own won't change much of anything. People believe what they are prepared to believe, what they've been primed to believe, what their gut tells them to believe. And remember that your gut is way closer to your heart than it is to your brain. It's also closer to your rectum, which should tell you something about how our president says that he believes it's both wrong because his gut says it's wrong. So I know we all dream of hearts and minds, and we use that expression a lot in this zone of activism / filmmaking that I live in these days. But here's what I've learned over 10 years of watching Pray the Devil Back to Hell change room after room after room of people in just 72 minutes. Hearts first. Hearts, because minds follow hearts, not the other way around. Which takes me to number 2 in my personal manifesto. Tone. Tone is everything. Do you remember when your parents would say to you, "Watch your tone, young lady"? When I was a teenager, my parents were fond of the word strident to describe me. And I never looked it up because I was pretty sure my feelings would be hurt if I did. So if you feel like looking it up, I'll save you the trouble. These are literally the synonyms Google gives you for strident. Harsh, raucous, grating, jarring, shrill, screeching, discordant, dissonant, and ear-piercing. It wasn't very nice, but I have to admit it was occasionally very accurate. When you're passionate, it's easy to surrender to the temptation to go straight to 11. I try to persuade people generally. Actually, I start at 12, when a 4 will usually do plenty. So I was lucky that Jimmy Redford's been there over the years to dial me back when I needed it. Volume and certainty should never be mistaken for authority or truth. I have learned this the hard way. I don't want to preach to the choir anymore, and even though a wise person once said to me, the choir occasionally needs practice, that's true. I would far rather temper my rhetoric and dial myself back to speak to somebody who isn't already inclined to hear what I have to say than to get praise and adulation from people who already approve of my opinions. So this is the spirit in which I approach the armor of light. I had a number of friends who'd spent a lifetime in pro-choice work who were horrified and in some cases enraged at the idea that I was reaching out to Reverend Shea, given his history of chaining himself to clinics and carrying a fetus around at protests to make his points. One friend yelled at me and said, "How dare you legitimize him in this way?" I can certainly understand the rage, but we're not on an island we can vote people off of, no matter how horrible we think they are. And if there is gridlock in this country, and if outcomes of our elections continue to frustrate and make us angry, it would seem that we'd have no choice but to engage with the people that we find deplorable, no matter how deplorable we find them, because nothing otherwise will change. So at first I was pretty afraid to meet the Reverend, and that's kind of funny to me now. He, it turns out, was afraid to meet me, so we actually had this smallish room we were sitting in, and when he walked in, he picked up a chair and he moved it literally to the other side of the room and sat as far from me physically as he could possibly sit. But he figured out I didn't have fangs or blood dripping from my claws, and I figured out he didn't either. And shame on me for thinking otherwise. We do go about with some pretty terrible prejudices on planet liberal. What I did find out later was that he was meeting me in part because he was beginning to question and doubt some of the positions he'd taken over the years. He was kind of curious what I had to say. I would never have known that if I hadn't taken the initiative to go and meet him. And so he lived in not one and not two, but all 3 dimensions, go figure. And what resulted from our meeting and from the film was precisely what all of us activists dream of when we dream of meeting with the enemy, right? He changed. He changed. And the irony is he didn't start changing until I realized and respected him enough to stop trying to change him. And wow, did he ever change? He was just on Terry Gross a few weeks ago telling her that he was now pro-choice. I way overshot. I never did. But it's really important to understand why and how he changed. He didn't change because I badgered him, and he didn't change because things had never properly been explained to him before. He didn't change to please me or to please anyone else. Ultimately, I think he only changed because I approached him with love in my heart, and that was really hard for me to do, and offered him my friendship. And I offered him that without conditions and without expectations. And he returns the same to me. And what began was a slow exchange of ideas and doubts, and that's just another way of describing friendship, isn't it? So I changed some and he changed some. It was very gentle, it took a long time, and all of it was really by accident. I don't know if that's a very practical way of changing the world. There were 60 million voters for Donald Trump after all. But the Over of Light was an attempt to make a film in that spirit. The way I think of that approach is number 3 on my manifesto, which is no more exclamation points. Exclamation points are not an effective way of changing people's hearts. And I tried to make a film that was really a long question mark. The world is bristling with declarations and assertions. We are all out there on social media and on TV and at Thanksgiving dinner, firing off the exclamation points like machine gun fire. But what would your reaction be if someone were firing exclamation points at you at Thanksgiving dinner? If you were normal, you return fire. It's only natural. That's why your crazy Uncle Peter, and there's nothing autobiographical about the word Peter, reacts the way he does. He may not seem reasonable to you, but neither do you to him, and so it goes. With ever-escalating indigestion for us all, the only people profiting by it are at Pfizer, making the Rolaids in the tubs. So I've decided to try on a little less certainty. I've decided to try inquiry and curiosity and doubt instead. And I know some things are true, absolutely. That is not inconsistent with what I'm saying. Racism is bad, war is bad, rape is bad, some things are just bad. And I'm acutely aware that I'm an extremely privileged white woman with a last name that right-wing people revere. In fact, I was banking on that. I know not anyone could do what I did, but I was never at any time asked to abandon or even moderate any of the beliefs I held dear in order to engage with people on the other side. I didn't even have to pretend that I thought differently than I did. Over and over again, I stood in front of some of the most right-wing audiences you can imagine and told them that I was a pro-choice feminist all my adult life. And not one of them threw me out, not once. I usually followed the declaration with this. I don't agree with you, but I don't think you're bad or stupid or crazy. I really just want to understand. And with that, there was, in every single case, a conversation I never expected to have, with people who were warm and welcoming and willing to engage. I think, given how polarized we are, that's just about all any of us can hope for the time being. I still get texts and emails from a couple of the ministers we met along the way, who were about 60 on the right-wing Richter scale, and I'm not joking, inquiring as to how I'm doing and what I'm up to, amazingly enough. And it's all very sweet, even though you can sort of hear faintly in the background a little bit of So when I first approached the Reverend, this is what I said to him. If we wanted to, we could start to fight right away. You've Googled me, I've Googled you, and it would not end well for either of us. So what if we didn't do that? What if we just know that we disagree and choose to take this big zone of disagreement and set it to the side, just for a minute? You know, I know it's important, you know it's important. It's not to say we'll never talk about it. We're just not going to talk about it today. What if we chose to find something we have in common and then just linger there for a minute? What if we manufacture a little common ground and then inhabit it by choice and decision and will? And I'm willing to guarantee you that if we spend a little time talking right now, we're going to find out that we're waving our fists at each other across a police tape because, in fact, we're more alike than different. And that's exactly how it went. I don't think this would have worked as well with a lot of the other guys. I don't know if you've seen the film, but there's a confrontation scene with 4 guys in a restaurant, and the other 3 guys, I'm very glad I didn't call that day. But I will tell you that if I hadn't made the attempt, nothing would have happened. I don't know which trajectory he would have been on without meeting me, but I do know he would probably be at the White House right now, because one of his oldest and best friends is. And what makes me really happy and proud is that he's really delighted he's not. I'm thankful. So rule number 3 for me is to use more question marks than exclamation points. In fact, I've discovered this is kind of a good rule in my life. I notice some days I have a question mark deficit when I measure them out, and they're usually correlate to really bad days. So it's a good rule for life. And that brings me to rule number 4. I loved riding horses when I was a little girl. Many girls do. It's the high horses that are dangerous and bad for your soul. So I've ridden many of them roughshod right over people's opinions and emotions and feelings, and I just don't want to do that anymore. There's nothing wrong with being a self-appointed defender of good against evil. It's self-anointed that I'm not so sure is so good. The difference is subtle, but everything. When my friend yelled at me for legitimizing Reverend Shank, I knew it didn't quite sit well with me, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it, why it didn't sit well with me. And then a few nights later, I just sat bolt upright in bed in the middle of the night and thought, who put me in charge of legitimizing people? Who put me in charge of that? All I have is the truth. And if I peel off from that, I don't have anything. So in Armor, we let the Reverend speak for himself. And in some eyes, he was admirable. In some eyes, he was contemptible. But we never put words in his mouth. We never took him out of context. We never, tempting as it was, undercut him with music or editing or talking heads. He stood or fell on his own, not because I was orchestrating anything. That might not seem like much to you, but I'm really proud of this. I get it now. He had to be a man entirely on his own for us to trust him enough to go with him on his journey, warts and all. Whatever I might have accomplished in the short term by undercutting him would have come at the cost of everything we got in the long term from the film. I think that's why we've had such success with conservative audiences. They appreciate being treated respectfully and three-dimensionally, warts and all, which they rarely feel they are in films. And I can't tell you how many times after screenings I had conservative people come up to me and thank me just for that, just for treating them respectfully. So when I started to think about the film that would eventually become Armor of Light, I had big megalomaniac plans. I wanted to permanently change the gun discourse in the United States, which are broken. Why get out of bed every morning if you're not going to shoot for the moon every day, right? I had cared for years about the gun question, and I understood it pretty well, I thought. But I didn't plan to do a film about it until after all my children left for college, so I wouldn't be looking over my shoulder for somebody with a Glock while I was pushing a stroller. But then Sandy Hook happened, and I decided to get off the sidelines. I had been, at the time of Sandy Hook, cultivating a sort of, I understand everybody ethos on my Facebook page, and so I had a few gun aficionados that I managed to forge a link with. But what happened among my Facebook friends was kind of startling. Each and every person took the fact pattern, an identical fact pattern, from Sandy Hook. There was no disagreement as to what happened there, at least not until Alex Jones got involved. And that identical fact pattern drove each and every one of them deeper into whatever foxhole they were already in. That is a broken dynamic. And you can't change a broken political dynamic by piling on. You have to go around it or above it, but you can't go through it. So I know it was crazy to think we could make all the difference, and of course we haven't. But we've made some difference. I'm sure of it. Which leads me to Manifesto rule number 5, smaller bites. I keep wanting to fix everything and fix it fast. But I'm a little older and a little wiser now, and I've been forced to come to terms with the idea that my time on this earth is limited, my power is limited, and the things that really need changing are complicated and slow to change. And all of that adds up to that I cannot expect to be effective at anything if I keep biting off more than I can chew. Film is small. I believe it best accommodates less rather than more. This is even more true when you're trying to move people's hearts. A mile wide and an inch deep never changed anybody. What will change the world is patience and strategy and smaller bites. I looked at the people who were most supportive of the gun agenda, and I asked myself what one single group could make the biggest difference. What group could be moved strategically? As someone who grew up in a religious Catholic household, I'd always wondered about evangelicals and how they could speak about the sanctity of every human life and not bat an eye about some of the gun language that was coming from the same places. I'm not a person of faith, but I have faith in people of faith. So I decided that maybe some of them might be at least somewhat susceptible to what Jesus had to say about life. He was pretty good on the subject, after all. And that's why I'm looking for anyone who would engage with me in good faith about how a belief in the sanctity of human life could coexist with the idea that I have the right to defend my car stereo with a lethal object. I still screen the film from time to time, and now that Lucy McBath just got elected to if you met her when I met her, it was just the furthest thing from your mind. Which brings me to the final rule of my personal manifesto, which is that films have really, really long tails if you want them to, and they can keep making a difference for a really long time. I know that we all get sick of a film at a certain point. If you sat in an edit room, you all know that there's one line or one shot that if you ever see again, you're going to tear your own eyeballs out. But I am so willing to get over that when I hear, as I do from time to time, about the movements and the meetings and the protests and the way people changed careers in their middle or started new careers, all because of that film I'm sick and tired of. And I had no idea when I started how good that was going to feel. I stuck with screenings of Pray the Devil Back to Hell. I still do them, and with Women War and Peace, and now with The Armor of Life. A lot longer than most filmmakers stick with their film. That's why they're coming at me a little bit slowly. I'm lucky that I don't have to move on to the next thing to make a living, and because luck has freed me up in that way, I've discovered that the longer you push a film, the further it can travel. Word of mouth, I've discovered, is a very slow-moving thing, but you have to be patient with it because there's no more effective way to get the word out and to get people to come to you with their hearts wide open. So far, neither Pray, nor Women War and Peace, nor Armor of Light show any signs of not being wanted or needed in the world, and I'm blessed to be able to continue to make sure that they're seen far and wide. As long as they can make a difference, I'm going to keep right on pushing them. And in this coming spring, we're going to have a second round of Women War and Peace films on PBS. So that's the manifesto in all its glory. Rule 1, facts are overrated. The more you inform, the less you enlighten. Rule number 2, don't be strident, or to put it another way, don't mistake certainty for authority. 3, question marks are more inviting than exclamation points. Inquire, be curious, and trust that if you're right, then the rightness will out in the end. Number 4, get off your damn high horse. Nobody put you in charge of anybody else's well-being, morally or any other way. Be humble. And number 5, Rome wasn't built in a day, but try to build it anyway. Number 5, this is the part where the plane was landing and it was 5 in the morning. And number 6, finally, don't walk away from the changes your film can make. Films have long, long tails. And if you abandon them early, you sold everything short that you worked so hard for. So that's the manifesto. And thank you so much for the opportunity.